M. Book 1. Written by Tim James Simpson. Narrated by Andrew Sims. Part 1. Nightfall. Chapter 1. Captain's Journal. This has been a most interesting voyage thus far, and it seems to have come to an end here in the Arctic. My passengers seem pleased with what they've discovered in this frozen wasteland of nothing but ice and snow. The leader of this expedition seems a queer sort of fellow, always dressed in heavy garb from neck to foot, and even his face is always fully wrapped in white bandages that seem fresh every time my eye looks upon him. It is not fully clear to me as to what it is these adventurers hope to find out here, but I feel the quicker we pull out, the happier I will be. End journal. He laid his quill down after looking over his journal. 5 months the captain and his crew have been out here searching for something unknown to them all. The ship creaks and makes all sorts of ghostly noises as the ice bumps into the old wooden hull. A man in his late 40s, who looks much older, has been the captain of this ship for many years now. His crew has always put their trust in him. That is until months of the bitter cold weather started becoming freezing, which only made the months seem longer, and still without any signs of progress, they continued forward deeper into the frozen tundra. "Captain, we have word from shore, sir. They found it," said First Mate Starbuck, with a sound of relief following with, "And it's about time." Captain Ahab stood up from behind his oak desk. The captain stumbled a bit from the wooden leg that replaced his natural one. "I want to see this thing for myself," he said as he limped his way around his desk to the doorway where his first mate was standing. He stopped just beside his mate. "And this had better be worth it," Ahab said as he continued past his first mate and down the corridor. On the deck of the ship it was bitter cold. Men were huddled around one another for warmth as they looked out over the frozen plain. The air was like trying to breathe in sharp needles as the breeze stung the lungs of the crew. The wind gave many sailors burns on their faces that froze their beards solid. Ahab made his way to the helm of his grand ship so he could see, with the use of his spyglass, the landing party making their way back, pulling something by way of a sled. It was gliding easily behind them over the frozen white terrain. "Mr. Owens, ready the ship to make sail," Captain Ahab said as he continued looking through his glass. The men struggled as they hoisted up the frozen cargo. "This had better be worth it," shouted Ahab once more as the frozen piece of ice was lowered onto the deck of his ship. The chunk of ice fell with a loud clunk as the sailors jumped backwards. "Be very careful, you idiots!" shouted the man everyone simply referred to as Griffin as he finished his climb up the roped ladder that hung from the side of the ship. "What is it?" Ahab shouted as he climbed down from his perch. Griffin fell toward the cargo, examining it. He had to see it for himself, and he had spent years researching the whereabouts of this one giant block of ice. Griffin was an odd-looking fellow. He was covered from head to toe, not an ounce of skin showing. Bandages covered his entire head, neck, and hands. Dark glasses covered his eyes. "He seems to be okay," Griffin said, looking up at his companion, one who had charted this big ship with him. "What have you brought aboard my ship?" Ahab asked as he hobbled towards the cargo. His men stood motionless, staring at the giant block of ice. "Well, Professor?" asked Griffin, looking up at his companion. "Don't worry, Captain. All is well," the one they called Professor said. The captain approached the new cargo that lay on the deck of his ship. Ahab stopped, frozen in his tracks, as he glanced down at the piece of frozen water that lay before him. "My lord," he said, staring in awe. He could see into part of the ice, and what he saw froze his already chilled spine. There in the ice was a pair of eyes, dark eyes staring back at him. Chapter 2. The December wind blew hard, knocking the snow from the treetops. The Coir Loch mountains howled with the night breeze, but still he ran as hard as his 50-some-odd-year-old legs would carry him. The trees in the night were beating against his large-brimmed hat, knocking it to the side of his head. His face stung from the cold, red and breathing hard. He kept pushing forward. He kept running. He glanced up on occasion, and he could see the giant shadows in the sky. They were looking hard for him now, and he knew what would happen if they ever found him. For 3 years now they just kept coming after him. He could find no rest. They kept hunting him as if he was their prey. He had killed many of these would-be assassins, and now more was sent to find him. He is a fighter, and this fight is no different than all the others. He killed their father several years ago, and now all of the offspring want his blood. He is tired, he is older now, and he has been fighting alone. Rest is all that occupies his mind at the moment, but out in these dark woods it doesn't seem possible. Faint music fills the air. Am I truly losing my faculties? He thinks to himself as he listens to the sweet tranquillity of the music that seems to whisper from the trees. How far is it? He thinks as he catches his breath, but just for a moment. It is somewhere in the distance, the sound. It's the sound of violin music playing, soft music, maybe a place to rest a while. He picks himself up off the snowy ground and pushes forward. His body screams at him. The pain was almost too much for him to bear, but he ignores it for now. Keep on the move, that's his only thought. The night was black, the moon hid behind the dark clouds of the night sky. Not even the stars were shining this night. The trees shaded the ground like evil spirits dancing around as the wind gently blew the limbs. He felt as though he was running with a blindfold on. He did not feel the hand that grabbed onto his shoulder until he was spun around. "You really think you can escape us, old man?" the half-creature, half-woman said as she slammed her newly caught prey into a tree. "You kill our master and expect nothing in return?" the evil creature said as she pushed her captive harder into the bark of the tree. "Now I am going to make you that which you hate so much," she said as she opened wide her mouth, revealing a set of razor-sharp fangs. Quickly the older man pulled a sharp piece of wood from under his long coat and thrust it deep into the chest of the evil woman. She screamed, mostly from surprise, thinking she had her prey. She could almost taste his flesh, but now watching him fade away as her own body formed into dust and blew into oblivion with the cold breeze of the night. He quickly turned to continue his run in the direction he had first heard the soft music playing. He could see a little better now. There it is, a cabin way out here in the middle of this dark forest. The snow crunched underneath his feet as he pushed towards the small shack. He could see smoke coming from the chimney, warmth, something he desperately needed. He made his way to the door. A flicker of a candle shone through the closed drapes. Someone must really enjoy their privacy to take up residence way out here, he thought as he stepped onto the porch. His energy was all but depleted as he lifted a hand to knock on the wooden door. There it was again, the music like the same he heard before. It stopped as soon as his fist pounded on the wood. He could hear the floorboards creaking as the owner walked closer to the door. The door slowly opened. He had to admit he was a little surprised at the man on the other side. He was very thin, a long, hollow face, a slight grey beard covering his thin, sunken cheekbones. He was dressed in a tattered smoking jacket, but his hair was neatly combed front to back, showing a high, prominent forehead. "How may I be of assistance to you, sir?" the man asked as he took the stranger by the arm, catching him before he fell to the ground. "Here you go," the cabin owner said as he set the traveller down in a big chair that was placed in front of a roaring fire. "From whom have you been running, sir? You are not a convict, but perhaps a hunter of sorts," said the owner. "Excuse me, sir, but why do you suspect I am running from anyone?" the traveller said, pulling off his gloves to warm his hands in front of the fire. "Well, aside from the obvious, the knees of your pants are very wet, indicating you must have either fallen or were pushed to the ground. Your boots are scuffed, showing signs of dragging the ground as well, as if you were perhaps running or at the very least stumbling. The flesh on your face bears a distinctive mark, like that of tree branches, as if you might have pushed your way through some dense forest in trying to hide for some reason or another. And, of course, the obvious. You were out of breath and exhausted when you found your way to my doorstoop," the owner said as he sat in the chair opposite the traveller. He pulled a pipe from a pouch that was placed beside the violin that the traveller had heard earlier. "And about the hunter. Why do you suspect me a hunter?" the traveller said, with an understandably curious tone to his voice. "Aha, yes, you are definitely a hunter, but of another kind, perhaps. Maybe not of the four-legged beast, but of possibly man, a bounty hunter maybe, with the unusual weapons that are fastened to your belt. I would say you are very crafty in your art as well," the cabin owner said, now lighting his pipe as he concluded. "Well, that's pretty good, stranger. May I ask your name?" the traveller said, glaring at the man as smoke rolled from the bowl of the wooden smoking utensil. "Oh, please forgive me, how rude. My name is Holmes, Sherlock Holmes," he said, extending a hand. "You have got to be jesting me, sir. Tales of your exploits have reached all over the world. I just thought you were a figment of Dr. Watson's grand imagination." Holmes laughed a bit. "I do have to admit, Watson does have an imagination indeed, and some of the stories have been embellished a bit, but I am very much real," Holmes said with a chuckle. "Now, friend, do me the honour of your name," Holmes replied. "My name is Abraham Van Helsing," he said as he took Sherlock Holmes' hand to shake. "So, Mr. Van Helsing, what brings you so far into the wilds of the wilderness on a bitter night such as this?" Holmes asked as he puffed on his pipe. "Mr. Holmes, the things in which I am about to reveal to you are so fanciful and outrageous that I wish I could not believe in them myself," Van Helsing said as he leaned in a little closer to Holmes. "Well, trust me, my dear fellow, I have heard and seen just about all there is to hear and see in my lifetime," Holmes said as he listened intently. "You are right, Mr. Holmes. I was running, and I am a hunter. However, the things I hunt are so foul and evil that I myself wish they did not exist. I would rather be able to retire to a secluded place such as this, and live out the rest of my days in solace, but as long as these foul things plague the earth I cannot find rest," said Van Helsing with all the intensity he could muster. "Please continue," Holmes said, still listening and puffing on his pipe. "Well, sir, they are called vampires," Van Helsing said, now relaxing a bit, seeming as though a heavy burden had been lifted, as he eased back in the big chair. 3 years ago I killed their Dark Lord, an evil vampire named Count Dracula, and ever since that night his followers have been trying to get me," Van Helsing said as he looked down at his hat that his fingers were nervously fiddling with. "But why would they bother? Other than revenge, of course," Holmes said as he leaned over and stoked the fire. "Well, once I killed Dracula, I took his remains and hid them away, fearing that somehow, someday, someone would find the way to resurrect the evil demon and loose him on humanity once again." Holmes was now sitting back in his chair, his long, thin fingers interlocked under his pointed, bearded chin. "And that is how you wound up on my doorstep. His followers were looking for you and chased you here. But they have one less follower to hunt after you now, do they not?" Holmes asked, staring at the hunter. "Yes, but how do you know that?" asked Van Helsing. "My dear fellow, you are covered in ash, and it has a faint smell of flesh to it. I suggest you get cleaned up. I will put out some water on to boil," Holmes said as he pushed himself from his sitting chair to his feet. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes," Van Helsing said as he rubbed his hands together. "Please, just Holmes will suffice," Holmes said as he picked up his water pail. Chapter 3. Inverness-shire, a small farming community. Everyone knows everyone, families are close, and when one hurts they all hurt. When one is happy they all rejoice, and when a stranger comes into town they all know that as well. They have been travelling companions for years now, both men wanted by authorities all over Europe. They were not always friends, in fact they met for the first time as enemies. It was almost 5 years before this night. One was running through the darkened forest as townspeople with lit torches chased after him. Oh, he was not afraid of the people of the small village that gave chase. It was not fear at all that caused him to run. It was more of a sport to him. The other one was terrorizing a small village and running amok, drinking and fighting. His face bore a horrible disfigurement. Most thought it was due to some terrible accident he had suffered, but no one dared inquire about it. In fact, most of their assumptions were almost correct. Both men were the same, and yet very different, and on the night they first met it was a battle for the ages. One was definitely a monster who was also a man. The other was a man who was also a monster, and the night they met was talked about all over the little towns far and wide. One was once a brilliant doctor, gifted in his chosen profession. He could heal with the right doses of medicine, and he could perform surgeries that would marvel the mind. That is, until he stumbled upon an invention, a secret in fact, that lay stored within his own laboratory. He was searching for a way to remove remorse from the human conscience. He wanted to live outside of the confines of morality and still not bring blemish upon his good name. In creating such a potion, the well-renowned Dr. Henry Jekyll disguised his own appearance using modern chemicals and named his unholy creation Hyde because it truly hid Dr. Jekyll away from the world.